Hi, I'm Chris Clark. I'm the weary artistic director of the 30th Annual Whitaker St. Louis International Film Festival. We are on day 17 of this monster event, and we're at a point in the festival that Andrea and I both love, and I'll make some introductions, and I'm going to disappear for a little bit. So thank you for joining us for this New Filmmakers Forum Roundtable. The New Filmmakers Forum is, we think, 23, 24, or 25 years old. We can't quite remember, and we should look that up because it could be 25. But this is a portion of the festival that is dedicated to emerging directors, first-time directors of narrative feature films that we think are the directors of tomorrow and the days after that. Our dear friend and mentor, Bobby Lautenschlager, former board member, lover of film, godmother to anyone who, she never met a stranger, was kind to everyone, read countless terrible scripts, and gave free advice and love and food to anyone who asked. But she was very passionate about this part of the process, and she wanted to encourage young filmmakers of all shapes and sizes and colors and sexes. And I love that more so than in the past, we have more women directors and more diversity. So I think that's an important part of the legacy. She passed away from lung cancer in 2009. Is it that long ago? Yep. So, but we carry this torch on and forever, and that's why the award is called the Bobby. With me today is Andreas Borsek. Andreas Sporcic Klund. I should add your married name because that's fair. But Andrea and I started as a volunteer when she started as an intern in 1998. And we both were hired, and we worked in the office. Andrea took a position with the Missouri Film Office over a decade ago and is now the head of the Missouri Film Commission. I've been in the same chair. Yeah, I've been literally the same chair for the last 21 years, literally a chair that was covered by interns when we were both volunteering there is my chair. So we have a lot of, both of us have a lot of legacy and time in the festival. This is our 30th year. But so she's going to take over this discussion with all of you and introduce everyone. Some of you have sort of met, and some of that we unearthed a couple of odd connections, been people who worked on each other's films. And that's part of the beauty of this competition also, that I don't think a year has gone by where two of the 5 filmmakers have not reconnected later on. We will announce the winner along with a $500 cash prize at our closing award party, which will be virtual. That'll be tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. So it's time for me to disappear and do personal life things, but I'll be back towards the end. I know we have viewers who are watching who might have questions for, about the process in general or to any of you. And we must thank, nonprofits like us require sponsorship and help across the board. And especially to be able to offer free things like this, which don't only cost any money, but does cost time and effort and stuff, and probably cost $1 or $2 here and there. So the Shalapa Vedavali Foundation and Shri Shalapa is a board member and a great filmmaker. He's lots of things. He has many hyphenates to his name. So they helped underwrite these sessions. And also the New Filmmakers Forum, the set of films is sponsored by Barry and Jackie Albrecht and Pat Scallett. So deeply indebted to their support for help. So time for me to disappear. I'll be back. So I'm very curious to hear how you all tell parts of your stories. See you later.
Thanks, Chris. As Chris said, I'm the film commissioner for the state of Missouri. I've also been, it's been my great honor to host this program for many years now, the New Filmmakers Forum, how I lovingly call film camp, because usually by now we've been in and out of minivans together. We've been late night drinking together, and darn COVID. Hopefully next year will be the year that we get to do all of those things again. But in the spirit of film camp, we're going to talk through the process of these first-time feature films with these 4 directors. Four of the 5 directors are with us to talk today. And I'm going to start out, and they're from all over. They're spread out today. We're coming from all over the country. So I'm going to have each of you introduce yourself just real briefly. Tell us where you are at the moment and the brief description of your film, because some folks maybe haven't seen them yet, but we'll have the opportunity through tomorrow night to see them. So we'll start with Isabel, if that's okay. Oh, you're muted. Let's see. Can you hear me, Isabel?
Hi, sorry, my internet connection was like, I couldn't hear you
Okay.
for a moment. I didn't realize you were talking
You're
to me.
good, you're good.
Yeah, my film is called Walk With Me, and it follows the story of Amber Evans, who is leaving a life and a marriage that she's not happy with and finds unexpected love in a woman. And it's a very personal, intimate journey of what that's like. And it kind of explores womanhood, sexuality, motherhood, work, all of it. Yeah, the social aspects of it.
Great, thank you so much. And you're joining us from?
I'm in Miami currently. I live in Brooklyn, but I'm in Miami at the moment.
Awesome. Alana?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks, Andrea and Chris, if you can still hear, for having me in my film. And it's great to be with this group of filmmakers and for all of us to celebrate our first features, which is, at least I can speak for myself, has been quite a journey. And yeah, I'm calling in right now from Missoula, Montana, which is where I have used to live, actually, and kind of multitasking, even though I wanted to be in St. Louis because I have about 40 cousins that live in St. Louis. But they've been watching the film, and yeah, it's wonderful to be a part of this festival. My film is called We Burn Like This, and it's about a young Jewish woman who's a descendant of Holocaust survivors who is living in Billings, Montana, and she comes up against some present-day anti-Semitism, and it triggers her into a journey towards healing. And I started making this film actually just about almost exactly 7 years ago. I moved to Missoula to start this story, and it was different, but we can get into that.
Yes,
and,
we will.
and yeah, so it's wonderful to be here and kind of cool to be calling in from Missoula as well. We're actually screening it for the first time in Missoula this evening. So
very cool.
But I currently reside in Los Angeles.
Wonderful. Awesome. Paula?
Hi, my name is Paula Rhodes, and I am originally born in Montana. So hi, Missoula, and grew up mostly in Missouri and St. Louis here. And so today at our screening at 2, right after this, oh my gosh, will be a very high school / college reunion-tastic for me. So I'm very looking forward to seeing a lot of familiar faces. And this fest in particular has been pretty special to me. I was really thrilled to be able to judge there's a short film section done with the Science Center that for a couple of years there I was judging. And so it was tied into this fest. It was just a lovely thing when I finally got my feature film done to be able to submit to it. And my film is called Delicate State. And it is a docufiction that was shot over the course of my actual first pregnancy with my husband and I as leads and the entire filming production crew. We do have like a handful of people that helped us with post. They're just amazing. But it documents our impending parenthood in an alternate timeline where the US breaks out in civil war. And we started filming in 2015 with no idea of how near to documentary this would veer. With no script. We just had post-it notes on like a whiteboard that I kept being like, I thought this was going to be a VFX shot, but let's just go down the street and film this. So yeah, it's a cautionary tale of sorts, and hopefully will empower some other people to see that if I can do this at my most vulnerable, maybe, and with these ridiculous circumstances, maybe they'll feel ready to go tackle their impossible goals too.
Awesome. Thank you, Paula. And Justin, tell us about you.
Yeah, I'm Justin Crum. I'm from living in Conway, Arkansas, Central Arkansas now, and my film is Papaw Land, and it's about kind of this 17-year-old kid from Arkansas who's in the middle of a crossroads, and him and his mom are kind of not doing too well. They've had a rough year, and she decides to send him to his grandfather's for the summer to kind of get his life straightened up and to have a father figure in his life, because she's a single mother. He doesn't have his father around. So But before he gets dropped off, though, he learns that his grandfather and his mother have had this kind of traumatic past themselves. And it kind of shocks his system, and she ends up kind of leaving him alone, you know, in this new place with this man he thought he knew, but maybe doesn't know as well as he thought he did. So, and it kind of explores the idea of inherited trauma, you know, and how every generation is affected by the one before it. So, yeah.
Great. So all of you have a passion and a personal part of you that are in all of these projects. So I want to talk, before we dive into that process, what kind of the bullet notes of what you did before this film that led you to filmmaking? What are the kind of steps that brought you to this area? Did you study film in school? Like, maybe Alana, you want to go first?
Sure, yeah. I come from a background in theater. I thought for a long time that I wanted to be a theater actor, and that's what I studied in undergrad, and eventually realized that I didn't actually want to pursue acting as a career by the time I graduated, and kind of had to restart and think about what I wanted to do. But I had started directing a bit when I was in undergrad, when I was, you know, frustrated with different ideas or not getting cast the way I wanted to be cast. I just started directing, and I realized that it came very naturally to me because I knew how it felt to be on the other side of things. And I knew, you know, the directors that I had worked with who I really liked, you know, what they had done and how they had treated me, and how we had put the whole thing together. So eventually I had the thought I could go to film school, and then I was completely overwhelmed at that idea because I had never made a film and I didn't know how to get into a graduate school. I didn't know what even the good graduate schools were, and figured I had to have a reel or something to show for myself to get into one of the programs, and gave it up for a little while, and then met someone who had been through the USC program and had gotten into USC without ever having made a film. And she kind of showed me in the application that you just need related creative experience, and you need to do a photo essay, but you don't have to have, at least when I applied, that's what the deal was. So I applied and got in and ended up going to USC graduate school for film production. And when I graduated from there, I was thinking, well, I want to make my first feature, and that's the way I could get taken seriously as a director. You know, no one's going to hire me straight out of grad school to direct things. I have to kind of make the opportunity for myself. So, and that was 7 years ago.
Okay, we'll pick back up there in a minute. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Justin, how did you come to this place?
Well, I mean, I started making films in high school, just, you know, in my basement with my dog, you know, and playing all the parts myself, kind of like Eddie Murphy and Nutty Professor or something. And then, because I didn't have many friends. And then went to film school. I went to Long Beach State. Spent about 10 years in LA, doing the whole grind there, the hustle there, and was writing a lot. I kind of consider myself a writer first, so I was writing a lot of spec screenplays and that kind of thing, but always wanted to direct a feature. And so, we moved to Arkansas, me and my wife and kids, a number of years ago, and it's kind of the perfect place to make indie film, you know, small films. You can do it on a real small budget. You know, there's not a lot of overhead, so it's been great. So looking forward to continuing.
Cool. Awesome. Well, we're friendly with our Arkansas neighbors, so we're honorary Missourian, and you have family too, so we'll count you.
Okay, thank you.
Isabel, what is your backstory?
I guess it started I was always like drawing and making up little stories as a kid and writing a lot as a kid, but I guess going into in high school is you know, what do you want to do with your life kind of thing. And I had no idea, of course. But the more I read descriptions of majors, I just was like, oh, film. But it kind of happened to me, like Alana was saying, I thought I needed films to get into film school. So I actually didn't end up going to film school. I went to NYU and was going to transfer, but I never did. And then I just started making shorts like right out of school. But I just knew I wanted to be directing features. Like that was like a thing for me. And then I had kids and I decided to raise them and kind of put things on hold for a while and step back in. I had made a few short films before I had kids. And then I made 2 seasons of a sketch comedy web series called Smile for the Camera. We did like 28 episodes of that. And that was like really like film school for me, just like honing in, you know, and like working with actors and camera and writing and lighting and all of that. And then I wrote this screenplay in 2014. And when the money kicked in 2018, it was just go time. And I remember being the first day on set of Walk With Me, I literally like internally thanked my high school self for putting me on this path, because I felt so happy and fulfilled. It was just like the beginning of like, yes, this is what I've wanted for so long. And yeah, and I want to keep going. So
I love that. Any high school kids that are watching right now, go with your gut and your passion. I love that. Paula, can you talk to us about your backstory?
Yeah, it's comedic, I guess. I grew up in St. Louis, which, although I always was drawn to storytelling and writing and things, it didn't seem like a viable career being here. So yes, you high school kids living here now, totally viable. Dumber people than you do it every day. But I entered a pageant. I am 5 feet tall. I'm 12-year-old size. I entered a pageant as a joke to amuse my friends in college. I went and I got a degree in journalism at Mizzou, yay. And I won the pageant, which you just hear my dad in the audience call out, "What?" when they said my name, which was funny. Thanks, Dad. And I parlayed that win into an internship in New York with one of the judges. And from there started like 5 internships for different casting and otherwise, and started to realize this was actually something I could do as soon as I got my head around the business side of it. And I got in on the acting end, was my first love. So originally to start creating roles for myself and my friends, selfishly, I guess, and like 48-hour film fests and short films and things. And then right as the web series was being born, I was in that group of kids in 2007, 8 and stuff that was really super into that. And we created so many darn shows. And it wasn't until I got pregnant and oh my gosh, almost 7 years ago, that my husband was probably tired of hearing me be worried about if I was going to continue to work and be able to define myself this way as a creative, which was important to me. And he kept saying like, "Oh, just make a movie then." And eventually I was like, yeah, we're going to do this. And I dragged him along with me. He's terribly game. Charlie's amazing. But it wasn't until I had kind of had most of the film done that the Chimera Project, which is an amazing organization that supports female filmmakers and female identifying filmmakers, a good friend of mine there, loved the film after seeing it and an early edit, and was like, you should apply for our award that we have that helps toward finishing funds. And I was like, I mean, this is my first thing directing. And she was like, hang on a tick, and brought up my IMDb for me and showed me all these things. She's like, you've directed all this. And I hadn't even really realized that in the course of things, just out of necessity, often I'd take on directing duties too for shorts and web series. And I was like, I guess I did. And I actually had enough to do a reel at that point, and was like, well, gosh darn it, I guess I'm gonna wear that hat too. But I really loved it for being able to have a little more say in the creative spin of each project. And yeah, I love this medium, this being able to tell stories and touch hearts and touch minds. It's really close to magic.
Awesome. I love that. So we're going to talk just a little bit about the script process. And I know, Paula, you guys had Post-it notes, so that's a little bit different. I'm sure that there's an outline process. Did you outline, talk about your big picture for the idea? Like, how did that come to be?
For Delicate State, yes. I looked around at the time at what was really, when I finally decided, all right, we're going to make a movie. We did it a little backwards. Instead of having your idea and then getting funding and deciding, we decided we were making something before we knew what it was. So once I had a camera that was dummy proof that I could really do amazing things with, granted, this was all over the first like 2 weeks of finding out we were pregnant. So it was very condensed learning curve. I looked around and was like, well, obviously pregnancy and parenthood is really taking up a lot of my bandwidth right now. So it'd probably have something to do with that. And who do I have at my disposal? Well, I got this guy here and I don't know, some equipment and, this amazing community of voice actors that I work with and actors that I knew I could call in, and some connections over at SAG where I knew I could probably figure out a way to work out a contract. And we just kind of rolled with it. And then I looked around and was like, well, it can't just be pregnancy. What's my crux there? And the other thing that was really taking up a lot of my mind and my concern was seeing, and this is again 2015, a lot of social media and mainstream media toss around the term civil war and tossing it around in a way that seemed like they were egging it on, cheering it on, hoping for it breathlessly, threatening it. And both my human side, my journalistic side, all of those were appalled, but the impending motherhood was the one that was really like, time out, people, a little responsibility here, because women and children and vulnerable people all over the world really experience war first and worst. And I was realizing my own mortality, kind of looking at that in the face for the first time as someone who'd been healthy up until then. Because I mean, we all know women who've had traumatic or tragic pregnancies and birth experiences, and that's with our, semi-functioning healthcare system. And that, the odds double at having something tragic happen if you're a woman of color. So I saw this and was like, these people that are calling for this or egging it on have no idea what actual war would look like. How do we identify our enemies in a civil war in the United States, guys? How is this going to work? And so I just wanted to explore that through the lens of people that were completely checked out as far as political involvement, because that's what our characters are. Even though we were very passionately involved in stuff and civically engaged, I had so many friends that just didn't have the bandwidth, didn't have the time, and that's totally understandable. But by having enough smart, intelligent people not pay attention or have time, we were letting the crazies drive the bus. And I wanted to kind of paint the picture of what that could look like. So we did an outline, and it was mostly out of Post-it notes that kept moving around as pregnancy and nation shifted. And pre-kid us were able to like grab the camera and go and film in other states if we needed to, political conventions, protests all over the country. So we did.
Cool. So it's almost like a doc. Your pre-production was almost production. So yes, very cool.
Yeah, it was very much depending heavily on our the only other person that was kind of in our bubble while shooting was our editor, Rachel Henry, who's amazing and really helped fill in any blind spots I had, where she's like, this is so great. I love this scene. Could we get a transition scene of something like this or that? And I'd be like, oh, yes, hang on. I think I got an idea. And we'd like run out and shoot that it was like, only because I have a kid who's obsessed with Minecraft, like when you're falling and you're building something in Minecraft as you fall, right? Like we didn't know what we were going to end up with necessarily, but we had a place we hoped we landed.
Awesome. Very cool. So that's her experience is probably a little different than you guys' experience.
I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah, the scripted side of things. But Justin, talk about, you said you're kind of a writer first. What was the timeline and process of writing?
Yeah, it was long, I guess. So I started, I did the first draft in 2007, and it was kind of born out of, it was born out of me missing kind of small town. I grew up in Virginia, so missing my summers with my grandfather, because I was in LA then. And it was a much happier, lighter story then. It was kind of a happy summer with grandfather kind of thing. And it did kind of well at some script writing labs and things like that. I went pretty far in some competitions, so it encouraged me. But I couldn't make it, so I put it on the shelf. About 3 years later, my mom told me all this stuff, all this history between her and my grandfather, which I hadn't known before that. And so I think it's over a few years of processing that, and also just getting older, getting more mature. The script kind of over time became much darker, and I kind of started incorporating, I wasn't writing it constantly, but it was just something in my head, and then when we decided to make something, I did a big rewrite and kind of changed the entire tone of the whole project. So I started in 2007, finished it, like 3 years ago or something. But yeah, so it was a long gestation process, I guess.
It needed that flavor. It marinated a bit. Yes.
Yeah, whole lot.
We're tying it in. We're tying it in, guys.
Yeah.
Awesome. Isabel, your story. What was kind of the process of the script?
Yeah, I had been writing an outline for a bit, and then I was like in a bad car accident and I had head injuries. So
Oh my goodness.
I like put it on hold just because I had to. And what was like fascinating is I got some like neurological therapy with this wonderful doctor. And as soon as my brain started working again, I wrote the first draft in like 10 days, I think. It was just like I sat down and it was like the main focus. And it happened to be my kids actually had, they both had the flu. So all of a sudden, I'm a single mom. So all of a sudden, like they were like sleeping like on the couch next to me all day. And I was just like writing, like I had time and quiet. And yeah, it was a really interesting experience. And then what's also interesting, you've seen the film, but music is a really big component in it. And right before I started writing the first draft, I was talking to a friend of mine, Adrian Walther, who's a musician who'd composed for a lot of work that I've done. And he mentioned that his sister was going on tour and was a musician as well. And I looked her up. I loved her music. I actually listened to her albums, her and her singing partner's albums, through the entire writing of the script. It actually helped me get there emotionally. Like tonally, it was just like on repeat on my headphones. So, and at the end of the script, I ended up, when I had my first draft, I contacted her and asked her to write the music for the film. So it's really like kind of integrated the two things. But then the script, I did a few drafts. The first person I shared it with was Devin, who was my lead actor, who was in my web series at the time. She had wonderful feedback. She loved it so much. And then like intuitively, I was like, oh, she's kind of perfect for this film, even though she has a musical theater background. And we had only worked together in a comedic capacity. But yeah, so the film kind of wrote itself. Like it really just poured out of me in a way. And it was like reflective of what I was going through in my life, like coming out later in life or having a whole rediscovery of myself. So it's not a true story, but the internal life is really based on what was going on for me in my world.
Awesome. Thank you. Alana, 7 years, did you say? I don't know. Okay. You're muted.
Yeah.
Okay, you're good.
Oh, yes, I'm here. Okay. Well, kind of like Isabel, my story is not real. It's not a real story, but internally, emotionally, it's definitely, a bit large part of me and some of the questions I've been asking, and kind of as 7 years have passed also have been asking. So I started writing. The script was originally called Cheyenne is Burning, and I wrote it actually first going way back in 2008, I wrote it as a short story when I was in undergrad. And then I made it into a 5-minute short film when I was in grad school. And coming out of grad school, when I was figuring out, okay, I should make my first feature somehow, I figured I really liked the short film, and I felt like I wasn't done exploring what that was about. So I figured I would write the feature length, but The problem is I had written this short film that took place in Montana and was featured. The main character at the time was an Indigenous young woman. And I sat down to kind of start writing in Los Angeles, and then got a few pages in and I thought, oh my gosh, how can I possibly write a feature? I've never been to Montana. Like, I don't know what I'm talking about at all. I can do a 5-minute film, but I can't do a feature. So I think, I think I had made it in Montana. I had set it in Montana because of my own ideas of what Montana was. I grew up in Iowa. So I think part of me wanted to make it kind of like a small town in Iowa, my experience growing up in a small town in Iowa, but different. And so I figured Montana, and that, Montana, that's so beautiful. There's not that many people, that I wanted the character to feel very kind of isolated and stuck where she was. And so anyway, to write the feature, I ended up just moving to Montana, and for what I thought would be a year. And I thought, I'll just move to Montana, make a film, go back to LA, go to Sundance. Like, that's just what's going to happen, obviously. And so I did move to Montana 7 years ago. And I had one friend who lived here in Missoula, which is why I landed in Missoula in particular. And I had barely been here. I had driven through on a road trip, and that was about it before, and started writing this film, which was very overwhelming because I had actually never even written a feature-length film before, and started writing, and then kind of stopped and started reading a lot about screenwriting, and kind of backwards teaching me because I was just getting stuck. And I just realized, I just thought it would just come very naturally, and in a way it did. And there were key emotional things that I was trying to say, but I needed more understanding and about structure and how to kind of build this story. And so I spent time in Missoula. I got connected to a few people, one of whom is my friend who grew up on the Northern Cheyenne Reservation. And so that was the identity of the character at the time. So I started spending a lot of time with her and her family in Eastern Montana, and writing the story, kind of living my life, working for other people, working on other films, and writing my story and rewriting. And a few years into it, I'm trying to kind of condense a very long story into a few minutes, but over the course of just having a lot of challenging conversations too, because I kind of dove headfirst into writing what I now can say was about historical trauma, and kind of like what you were saying, Justin, about inherited generational trauma. And I didn't really realize that that's what I was actually writing about when I started. And I, over time also was just having challenging and honest conversations with people about, people challenging why I was telling a story about an Indigenous young woman, and it's fictional, it's not even, I'm doing it because there's a real person, I'm making this up. So why? And I had to keep answering that for myself. Well, why am I doing this? Why? And I realized that, that maybe there was worth considering making it more personal. And a kind of alongside that, it turned into being 2016, and the morning after the 2016 election, there were these neo-Nazi flyers that showed up on the doorstep of Har Shalom Synagogue in Missoula. And Missoula is kind of known as being a much more, in terms of Montana, a very liberal area. And so the fact that happened in Missoula, where I was living, shook me up and made me start thinking about my own identity in a different way, combined with conversations I had been having with people in the Native community. Just people there are so connected to their history and who they are. And so I too had to kind of share more about, when we were chatting, who I was and my grandparents were Holocaust survivors, and I grew up in Iowa, and I never met my grandparents. So that fact, was never something I thought very thoroughly about. It was just kind of a fact, and nothing I had much of an emotional connection to. But basically, through talking more with Indigenous people who are so connected to their historical trauma, I realized that they helped me realize really that I come from this lineage of historical trauma, and what does that mean? And maybe that's where some of this story is actually coming from for me. So I basically restarted and adapted my whole film to be the main character being a Jewish young woman who is feeling lost and disconnected and looking for a sense of belonging and healing. And so it's basically the same story, but instead of being centered on Indigenous historical trauma, it's about Jewish historical trauma. And so I have written and rewritten this script a lot, and eventually kind of got to the point where I knew that there were ways that I could make it better. There must be ways that I could make it better, but I just could no longer see it clearly, and felt like I just have to shoot this thing, and we have to shoot, and this is my best after this amount of time. So that's the script. Yeah, it's such a mashup as it is now. The script is a mashup from inspired by people's friends of mine and their lives, as well as my life, and the core kind of undercurrent is definitely some of the feelings and questions that I have about generational trauma and Jewish identity, and just overall, like, how do we heal is kind of one of the main questions as well.
Part of it is talking about it, and you are all talking about these things through your films, which is powerful and important. I love that. We're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about the most fun part, the financing, of course. The greatest, everyone gets so excited, but everyone wants to understand how that works. So who wants to go first? Justin, will you talk about how you put your financing together to get the film made?
Yeah, honestly, the beginning, it was just a leap of faith. I was working at the local PBS station here in Arkansas making documentaries, and I just knew I needed to make a feature, and it came down to I just felt like it was time. I needed to grow, and I just put my 2 weeks in, and I had this script, like I said already, that I thought we could do cheaply. So I jumped in with no money and just kind of started making it. And it was kind of piecemealed together. Basically, we had some savings, me and my wife, we put in initially. A few months in, we did a Kickstarter, which was successful, thankfully. And the community around me seemed excited about it, which was huge. And after that was successful, we were able to get a few investors too that put in a little money, but mostly we just did it very cheaply, and we just got money at each stage when we needed it, was basically our strategy. It's extremely stressful to do it that way. It's not ideal. You'd like to have it all up front and know you don't have to go looking for money every step of the way, but that's just the only way we could do it. So, yeah.
Thank you. Isabel, how did you put your financing together?
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, I finished the script in 2014, and I was like, great, I have something. And I was like, but there's no money. So I just put it to sleep. And I went on with my life. And then a few years later, I was in touch with someone from high school who's a filmmaker, and he read the script and was like, you need to make this. And I was like, I don't have any money to do it. And he insisted. He said, we'll do it the way you did your web series. Like, just do it on the cheap, and you'll make it look good as you can. And then, so I started looking around, and I ended up finding somebody that wanted to fund the film privately. It was $80,000. We made the whole movie on $80,000. So it that being a limitation. I mean, it's a lot of money, but making a feature, it's not a lot of money, especially in New York City. So the way that we made it work was we shot the movie, because the story takes place over the course of a year. We shot it 1 week at a time over the course of a year, because I didn't want to try to fake seasons, and we didn't have a budget to put snow on the ground, or, you know, and that was a really interesting process because we got to really like live in the movie for a while. And yeah, but like my apartment, we built up, I live kind of in a loft in Brooklyn. I built walls in my place. It became Amber's home and like the center of production. I walked down the street and walked into cafes and restaurants and bars and told them what I was doing. And most everybody opened their doors for free, like, awesome. Which is unheard of in the city. That, you know, the limitation was that we would have to get in and out before they opened. So we, for most of our locations, had 5 hours to get in, prep, block, shoot, and get out. It was like so little time. So it was like really condensed and high pressure, but it was there was such great synergy on set. Like we were a tiny crew, like 9 people. And anyway, music going on.
Sorry, I think Chris, can you mute? Okay.
But yeah, so the whole film was done on $80,000, and that's also because I didn't pay myself. So it was like written and directed and edited for free. But, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you for being candid. I know code of silence on numbers that will or will not be shared. Okay. So Alana, how did you put your financing together?
Yeah, definitely, you know, in pieces, like some of the others have mentioned. We received a few grants from the state of Montana, and it's great to connect with you, Andrea, because our Montana film commissioner was a huge support, and Montana actually, the film office offers grants to filmmakers who are going to shoot their film in Montana. And so that was definitely our first kind of seed money and helped me when I was having doubts. We actually got that grant years before we actually shot, and it was just kind of sitting in the bank, and it's what helped me keep going. You know, when we got the grant as Cheyenne is Burning, and then it changed. So yeah, that helped me not give up, because I thought, well, we have this seed money, we can make it, we got to make it, someone believes in us. So yeah, and Montana Arts Council, we received grants from them as well. And then it was just fundraising. We did a number of in-person fundraisers here in Montana leading in, and later kind of saved our online fundraising for post-production. We had enough money, we raised enough money to go into production, and figured I would figure out the money for post-production when we got there, and could actually show people we had made and help people believe in the project and want to help us finish it. And so, and then I think because we ended up shooting in Billings, Montana, my partner, who's also the producer and the editor of this film, he grew up there and his family's there, and the community really came together around us. And, you know, if they couldn't offer us actual money, they kind of gave us money in terms of housing our crew or housing cast members or making us meals.
Oh, did we lose you?
Or putting, oh, am I lost?
You're good. You were frozen for just a second.
Okay. Okay. Well, the community of Billings really came around us and supported us, and that's what helped us stretch our dollar. And you know, we were a small crew as well. There was about 12 key crew members that were with us for the entire shoot. And yeah, so we definitely are a product of the community. And in the end, I'm so glad that it took me this long to make the film, because it meant I really spent time living here and understanding both the different parts of Montana. You know, I used to just, before I had any friends, I would just leave for the weekend and drive around Montana and go to different towns and kind of imagine setting the film there. And Montana's huge. It takes many hours to drive to different parts. So that definitely occupied plenty of weekends for me. But yeah, it was great to finally land in Billings, and Billings, you know, has this history of anti-Semitism, actually, that is what made me want to connect it to that community. And, you know, the rabbi in the movie was the rabbi in Billings at the time, and the congregants were the Jewish congregants who live in Billings and things like that. So yeah, I think it's just a combination of having some money and from grants and donations, and then being able to spend less money and get more because of all the community support and people who rallied around us.
Awesome. Very cool. Paula, budget wise, how did you put your financing together?
I mean, it sounds very similar to these other amazing humans. It's, you know, fast, cheap, or good, right? You get to pick two. And I didn't want to give up good, and I didn't have an option on cheap. So it took us forever. But, you know, bonus was we got a couple pickup shots during our surprise second pregnancy, I guess. We used what we had. So basically it was like savings to buy camera, borrow lavs. Okay, we have us. And then it became applying to grants, which I will tell you, when you don't have a script, people are remarkably unreceptive. So I got pretty much nowhere with that. And I had, you know, this limited amount of time during the pregnancy that I knew I had to get it all in on. So we just started shooting, and we worked under a SAG Media contract in 2015, which allowed me to get the amazing actors I did, who were in our circle anyway. And then as we finally got everything, our last shot, by the way, was right as COVID shut everything down in LA, and we grabbed some shots of like the completely empty shelves in a store. Guerrilla. So then when we started, so really our only expense was paying our editor, who was giving us an amazing friend rate, but that's still, you know, it would be like we save up a little, we book another commercial or something, and then we toss her some money to get at the next section. And over the course of the years, finally, my friend at the Chimera Project, again, guys, like definitely connect with them, because they're such amazing champions of female filmmakers. And they kind of, when I applied for their award, I ended up winning the To Get Her award. That allowed me to have a little chunk to be like, I think I can get my VFX now for those last little bits I needed. And it turns out you need more than just VFX. You also need sound and color correction and all sorts of things. So as we got closer to that, I put together a little crowdfunding adventure, which I'd done plenty of for web series. So it's kind of old hat, but it was still, it's always a slog, right? Asking the fundraising part is tough. But we lucked out and did amazingly well with that, and ended the day before lockdowns were announced and photo finish. And we had just gotten word that we were going to do a special screening or debut. Granted, we're still like running through post at that point, at the ArcLight in Hollywood, RIP ArcLight, and with Chimera and with Slam Dance. And I was like, yes, we can do this. I don't know how, but we're going to. And we were rushing. And then it turned out by probably the end of March, we were very, very aware that nothing was going to be screening in theaters in May of 2020. So I was like, okay, this is fine. This is actually better. Probably we'll take our time, and I can actually afford all the shots that I like for this VFX, and to somehow figure out a way to do ADR remotely with my actors, who luckily most of them had voiceover booths at the time, where I would loop in voiceover actors to toss me stuff and mix it into the sound design. Because so much of building our world out from this very intimate eyes in is using the sound design in our film. So I knew I had to get that well, which is a new adventure when you're doing it via like Google Notes, instead of sitting down with your sound designer and like hearing it in the room and tweaking it as you go. It's a longer process. But yeah, we took our time because we had to, and you just kind of piecemeal it as you go. It was a passion project, so putting in our dollars and cents as we could, and I hope to someday repay my children's college fund. Should be fun. But yeah, after our premiere, we got some exciting news. So hopefully be able to announce that shortly too, on how people can see it globally early next year.
Very cool. Awesome. So I think we are going to take a few questions. I'm waiting to see them pop up in the chat, but let's do a big broad question. Like, what did you learn? Biggest lessons learned from this project that you're going to take into your next film? I know it's a big one. Isabel?
I think writing, that was like, when we started filming, well, actually, when we had our first cut, I ended up cutting 4 or 5 scenes, like that were just repetitive, It was like, we made this point, we're making this point again. Okay, we're gonna do, like it was just, I never went to film school with my first feature. Like it was really, writing was like the biggest thing that I learned more about. And now that I'm like really close to finishing my next script, and it feels like a real jump in what I'm capable of already, because of making this first one, really like just getting really in there. And I'm really excited about this next screenplay. And of course, like the independent film part of it, just, getting things done and hustling. But yeah, really the writing is what I've learned the most about.
Cool. Justin?
Yeah, I mean, I've learned a ton of things. I think the biggest things I've learned, I know I said I consider myself a writer first, but I realized after I shot the script that I wasn't a very good writer in terms of I didn't, not that I was a bad writer, but I wasn't understanding how exactly the scripted words will translate in the final edit, and what is absolutely needed and what's not. I think I was a little too loosey-goosey with my script. It wasn't, so we had a lot of stuff when I was shooting that I thought was absolutely necessary and made everyone, trudge through mud for hours to get. And then when I was editing, because I was editing as well, when I was editing it, it would go within the first week, and it's like, oh wow, yeah, I could have probably seen that coming if I really had that, if I knew what I know now, So I think a lot of it for me was, yeah, if I'm doing the next project, making sure the script everything's as necessary as possible. And also just the other thing I learned is I kind of jumped in, like I said, with a leap of faith and just hit the ground running, but I didn't spend enough time really getting spending time to get those closest collaborators up front. So I was producing, I was, in pre-production, I was doing all the producing. In post, I was doing all the video editing. And I feel like I need to spend more time to, develop a relationship with a better producer than me and a better editor than me, and let them do their jobs. So that was kind of, finding better collaborators and taking the time to do that. Cause it's not, I did find some, but I didn't always take the time to really, I guess, get to know them as well as I should have. And it didn't always work out. So yeah, spending time with finding those collaborators, I think, is important. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Paula, biggest lessons. What will you do different in the next one?
But thank you for not calling on me first. I love stealing other people's good brain babies. definitely will have a script. It is far easier to go with a roadmap and so much easier to go in this collaborative art with amazing brains beside you, adding in that good, you know what it is? It's making you not have to climb the learning curves as you go, because that was a lot. And I will say, I've noticed that my strength, which I didn't have in this film really, was being able to, because I've had all different positions on film sets, is really listen and see where, how to take care of my crew or my cast, like kind of parent in a way, the film. And I think that's through this process, I've really learned even more on how to not be the director that I don't like, I guess. Right. But the most practical lesson has been what deliverables are and how to keep track of all of my organizing, all the things that you're going to have to scramble and deliver in a week or two when you get that deal, because it's a lot if you don't have an awesome producer doing it along the way for you. So in the future, I will keep much better records from the start and have an on-set photographer if possible.
These are good things, big things. Yes. Alana?
Yeah, I think the main thing is writing for me as well. Actually, as I was mentioning that I wrote and rewrote my script so many times, but I did that also in a very isolated way, that I was writing and rewriting and kind of in my own head a lot and trying to make it better and figure it out. But also, it's challenging especially if you're developing a script for many years, that you might ask someone to read it and to give you notes, but then you have a new draft and then you can't ask that person again. It's a big ask to ask when, when someone asks me to read a script, it's a big ask. It takes time and thoughtfulness to really give feedback. So I ended up kind of just doing a lot of the script myself. And I think what I've already started doing differently, because I guess because I was at home a lot earlier this year, that I started joining more writers workshops online, and I started developing I had an idea for my next script, and I signed up. Actually, I highly recommend the Sundance Collab courses that they offer. It's kind of a newer element of Sundance and very accessible, and they have classes on every aspect of filmmaking. And I signed up earlier this year, I signed up for a couple of their writing courses, and then also was a part of another writers group that was really helpful through women who are alumni from USC. And so was kind of doing both of those things at the same time, working on the same script. And that was just so lovely and so supportive, because then people have to read your script and you're getting notes every week. And that's an element I loved about being in school, was me having deadlines that were not self-imposed, and you were being held accountable, and just had to keep pushing, keep writing, and then keep getting feedback and learning, and also reading other people's scripts. So that helps me be a better writer too, and think about what my notes are for other people. And so that already has been a much more joyful process of writing, of just actually enjoying it instead of just the grind and it's just so intimidating to just look at a blank page, on your computer screen. And so yeah, I'm still refining the script. And I think, yeah, putting together the team, I basically haven't totally started that yet. I just was trying to get to a little bit of a stronger place with the script. But I think, yeah, building our team, which I did do on this last film, but I think building the team in such a way that we could have a little bit of a larger budget would be great, and be able to primarily just be able to pay people better, because a lot of the people who, including myself, you know, we were stepping into these roles. A lot of the crew that, you know, we were doing it because a lot of the crew, we were doing it because it was our first time being that role on a feature length film. And, you know, a lot of the crew were people who I knew here in Montana from working with them on other people's films, and or working with them through the art house cinema that I used to work for here in Missoula. And anyway, we all didn't get paid that much, and I would love to be able to pay everyone for the hard work we're doing, and have therefore just need more of a budget. And yeah, I think those, having the script as a foundation to help attract a team, so that our financing kind of comes together in a little different way, which will be a new adventure for me, since I did just kind of stubbornly just want to do it by myself in a lot of ways, and kind of ran off into the mountains and didn't want anyone to tell me, you know, what to do. So I just did it on my own. And I think this next time I would like more to build more of the team earlier on. And I think that will help us make a stronger film too, of just, yeah, attracting the right people to be a part of it, to help work together. Cause it's just such a team sport.
You did.
And yeah, I guess.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So which we'll kind of, I think we have some questions, and I'm going to have Chris pop back on here in a minute, but quickly, what is next for both this film? What do you foresee happening next with this film, and what are you working on next? And I know, Alana, you did kind of mention you're in process on the next film, but Paula, what can you tell us anything about what's next?
She called me first this time.
Yes, I did.
Yes, we'll have an announcement shortly, so you can follow the film at delicate_state on Twitter or Instagram, for how hopefully more eyes can get on it. And then a couple more fests in the pipe, but I'm excited to get this film baby out there. And otherwise, I have, you know, all the different hats I wear, the irons in the fire. So whatever one's hot, I kind of just pull it out as needed. But I'm really excited to get to shadow direct a video game soon, a really big one that I'm, because I love doing motion capture and voiceover work too. And so I'm getting to watch an amazing director do her thing there, and kind of start dabbling in that arena, which I think will be terribly fun. But otherwise, just continuing the acting, the writing, the all the things, I guess, in parenting.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot, but definitely I'd love any people joining in. I love to follow back for your adventures too.
Very cool. Justin, what's next for the film and for you?
Yeah, so St. Louis was kind of the first stop for us. So we're at the beginning of our festival run, and hopefully, you know, we have a lot of submissions out there that we haven't heard from. So hopefully we kind of I'm hoping for a packed spring, and that we get into some good ones there and keep the ball rolling. Yeah, so we don't know. I mean, we're in very, very early stages of distribution and that kind of thing. So I don't really know anything there. In terms of a next project, I do have a new script that I finished about a month or two ago. So hopefully we can get something going with that, but it is a bigger budget. And, you know, I know after making this, how difficult it will be to find the kind of money I'll need for it. So we'll see. I might end up writing something else that's even smaller if I get antsy and just need to shoot something. So yeah, we'll see.
Just keep moving. Yep.
Yeah.
Isabel.
Yeah, well, Walk With Me has gotten 2 distribution offers, and so we are currently negotiating with one that feels like might be a good fit. So in a few months we'll be out in the world, which is really exciting. And then, like I mentioned before, I'm writing another screenplay. I'm about to start my 12th draft, where like I wrote like 4 drafts of Walk With Me, I think, and this thing is like a beast, and I'm so excited about it. But like Justin said, it's gonna require a bigger budget, and we can't shoot this one over the course of a year and all that. So, but yeah, this is a supernatural drama, and it's very close to my heart, even though that might sound strange. And I'm really excited about it. So,
Awesome. Do you want to tell us a little more about your next project, Alana, or what's going on with the film next with We Burn Like This?
Yeah, we premiered at Santa Barbara in April, and we've been kind of going from there to many different festivals and a couple internationally as well. We were in France in September, which was amazing. And we as well are working on our distribution deal, and hopefully the film will be more widely available in the near-ish future. And yeah, we have some, like others, you know, we'll see how that lines up with our festival run, our continued festival run. But I know of at least a couple more, and have submitted to plenty more. So we'll see where we go from here. And yeah, trying to get the next one up, which hopefully will take less than 7 years, but who knows?
We are pulling for you. Yes, all of you. Well, thank you again for being on this panel. And I'm going to see, Chris, what kind of questions does the audience have?
There's a few, but first I want to say, you know, thank you all for participating, not only in this part today, but, you know, for the festival and for making the film. The cruel part of this contest is we've, you know, in typical situation, you've been hanging out with each other all weekend long, gone to parties and dinners and sat and watched movies together and did each other's hair and all kinds of things. Or you know, because they've been all,
I don't remember doing hair.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll just pretend. I'm just rambling. But, you know, people become friends. But in the end, there was one winner. But with that said, you know, it is meant to instill community and make introductions and be a small step in the vast river of filmmaking, a nice firm stone, we hope. And you know, so we appreciate, you know, the passion you did. And, you know, we had about 200 something submissions, and, you know, the original pool that I got it down to was like 15 or 16. So I just wanted to tell you all that you truly earned your spot. I saw something in there that made me want to see more and to have you part of this process. So, you know, welcome. And I'm sorry, Hunter couldn't be here. He's quite a character. His day job is a content creator for Disney. So maybe that pulled him into the maw of the abyss or something. But, you know, you all belong here. So that's what I wanted to say. So I have a couple specific questions for specific people and a couple general things that will kind of round up everything with. First is for Paula, who gets the Freshness Award because she was just as bubbly at 12:30 last night when I picked her up. And that energy level, I'm telling you, is that's her. That's her. So this first question is for you. You mentioned the film's pretense is civil war and filming during protest. How did you and your film crew prepare for going out into what could be potentially, you know, violent or hostile environments? And were you anticipating just adding visual effects later?
The film crew being sometimes just me, or sometimes just my husband. We, again, starting in 2015, the only real protests that had violent outcomes were in Ferguson, where my father used to teach in that school district down the way. So I wasn't on extremely high alert, other than, we went to Washington for the march. We went to Detroit and other political conventions. So some of it was probably a little ambulance chasey of us, of like, well, if there is, I guess we'll catch it. Naivete. But we, without giving too much away about the film, what you see is what people who aren't throwing themselves into the middle of it would see, right? You see the peripheral, you see it playing in the background around us and building out the world. So we didn't need to get ourselves in the middle of a melee, you know, or anything, to have the effect of seeing that things were unraveling in the nation. And I think that's probably a lot of people's experience, where you end up making assumptions based on what you might hear in the news or hear a friend post versus what you see. And it's not until our characters actually go and see some actual action, or it comes to our doorstep, essentially, that they really start to have to pay attention. And some of that was like right after the 2016 election, going out downtown LA. There was a little more action in that night, but I didn't feel unsafe. It's an excellent question. I think now, after 2020, I would probably be, and having children now, probably a little bit more conscious of my own safety. But in general, I will say that a lot of what you see in the news, having a journalism degree, I feel pretty safe saying this as well, is going to be whatever the most intense, scary footage they can get you to watch is. So even when I was at protests that really did devolve into some action at night, they didn't look like that. Most of it didn't look like that. So you're able to be there all day, for the most part, on the peripheral, and get some really cool shots without getting in any real danger. So what you're seeing in the edited news clips of a couple seconds are not the entire story. And I do think that's also always important to remember. And it's only one spin of a story, depending on where that outlet is putting the footage, right? So thank you for your concern of safety, I suppose. It's always important to keep your own safety in mind when you're filmmaking. But I will say things do feel more dangerous lately than they might have on the street in 2015.
I think of the films, it speaks to something you said earlier. I think yours is maybe, if this is fair, the most bare bones. Because
surely. I mean, I am super jealous of all your crane shots and dolly shots and lovely gaffers. Oh man, I can't wait.
But that's something that stood out to me, that you were able to tell the story. It's just like you had a blank room and a piece of paper and a pencil, that you just used what you had, and you made the paper into a paper airplane, and did something else. You used the things you had, including your own body, became a character too. So just passively recording these things and kind of making it part of the story, because you can edit something into any kind of storytelling, as we know. News does it all the time. So you use what you had. So it was very creative, and a good experiment, for a first time feature filmmaker.
Along the way of a documentary, we shot way more than we used. There's a lot of footage on the cutting room floor, as it were. But yeah, it was a learning curve.
Okay. This next question is for Justin. As a screenwriter, have you ever written a script for someone else to direct? And I guess they're asking, so is it easier or harder to write a script for someone else, or let someone else direct it versus you directing it? So I guess it's like that, is it you're giving away your child and then watching, that you don't have direct control and your fingers on it, is there a disconnect in that type of scenario? And have you been there?
So was the question, would I do it, or what's the difference?
Or if you done it, written a script for someone else and then let them take it.
Not from the beginning of the process. No, I have rewritten, I have writer director friends, a lot from film school, and, I've rewritten other people's scripts for them. But that's a little different. That's pretty quick and fast and furious, and they have everything there already, basically. So I haven't actually just written a script for someone else. I'm not opposed to it. I would love, if it was the right filmmaker, I would totally, and the right story, I would totally do that. I'm all about the story and the project and the people I'm working with. So if the circumstances are right, I definitely would. There is a difference. I was helping a colleague with a script last week, and I hadn't done it for a while, like a long time. And I found myself so self-conscious because he would be directing it, and I didn't want to overstep. He had already written a draft. I didn't want to overstep my bounds or do, so it is strange to write for someone else, because as a director, I write it as I would direct it. You're really visualizing it shot for shot in your head, as you're writing, or at least that's how I do it. I'm watching a movie as I write, I'm kind of visualizing it as a movie already. So it's hard if someone else is taking that, because they might see it totally different or from a different perspective. So it is trickier, but it's something I would totally be up for. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would personally struggle with that because Andrea's worked with me before. She knows that I just put my fingers in everything, whether requested or not, because just this is how I operate. So it would be hard for me to, create something and give it away. I would never, boundaries would be difficult for me. So it has to be a challenge.
Yeah.
Okay, we have some couple direct or more general questions, and I'll start with you, Alana, if that's okay. Did you seek out any mentors? And we'll ask the same, we'll go in order and ask this already. Did you seek out any mentors during the filming process? The questioner, Brianna Holland, is a new filmmaker herself and was curious if there's anything you wish you had more support or knowledge on before starting production. Hence, if you had someone looking over your shoulder was telling you things that, gee, I wish I would have known that sooner. So that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. I think perhaps because of I've studied a lot of yoga and meditation in the past, and that's definitely a part of the kind of tradition of that. You have a teacher, so I definitely have looked at other people who are doing something that I'm trying to do and trying to get in touch with them and trying to ask them questions. I remember getting in touch with Chloe Zhao, actually, who at the time when I was starting was making songs my brother taught me, which especially in the original incarnation of my film, our films were somewhat similar. And so, yeah, I spoke with her. I stayed in touch with a few of my teachers from USC over this whole period. And then my main mentor, I'd say, has been Andrew Smith, who is a writer and director who's made a few great indie features. And he ended up it's just someone I ended up meeting when I moved here to Missoula. And he's from Missoula. He grew up here or near here, and he was looking for a nanny, actually. And I needed a job, and I actually have nannied quite a lot before I went to grad school. So I applied to be his nanny, and then said that I just moved here from USC and I'm going to make my first feature. And he was just like, what do you you want to be our nanny? But he said, we do need a nanny, but I also, would you like to be my assistant? And so that ended up being my job, being kind of switching back and forth between being his nanny, as well as his assistant, as well as his wife's assistant, Courtney Saunders. And kind of he has joked with me that I was his intern, except that he was paying me to be his intern. So it was kind of an unusual mentorship, because he had just finished this film called Winter in the Blood when I met him, and that was a film that he had made very independently in Montana, and he was doing kind of the finishing processes of that. So, I was often helping him with all sorts of stuff that was very relevant to the kinds of things that I was trying to do. So he has definitely been a mentor to me, and has continued to be, right, in terms of watching cuts of the film, reading versions of the script, giving notes. And
is he in the film too?
He's not in the film.
Oh,
no.
Okay.
He's just been a huge support and basically introduced me to everyone I know in Montana. And it's pretty profound. So yeah, mentors, I think, are super important. And I think it's starting to I'm starting to realize too, suddenly, that, people are reaching out to me with similar questions that I used to reach out to other people with. And that's a strange moment to be kind of like changing
own it though, and enjoy it. And maybe you do have something to tell these people, and don't disbelieve that it's just your turn. So that's a great story. So with no pre-planning, you were a great person to start with that question, because the whole nanny bit, it's a weird connection, but those things happen and work. Karin Kusama, who is from St. Louis, was John Sayles' personal assistant for years. And then she made Girl Fight. And then she made, Ian Flux, but we won't talk about that. But then, she's had this great career just from being the assistant. I don't think she was a nanny too. That's an extra layer, which is
Yeah.
great and hilarious, but that it works. And, like Paula mentioned, she knew somebody on your credits. So I always watch all the credits, especially with local films, just to see who's working with who and who's switching roles and who just pitched in for a day. It makes a difference. It really is a small village overall.
Yeah, and I think, and I know I'll hand the mic back, but on that note, Paula was saying before we came on that she knows one of my executive producers, Eleanor Nett, and Eleanor and Netta Armian, who came on as our executive producers, those are people I met through working on another Montana film called The Ballad of Lefty Brown, and I was the director's assistant on that film, which I also got because I was Andrew Smith's assistant and his brother Alex Smith's assistant on their film Walking Out. So it's just, I think I have definitely not shied away from, being willing to work for other people and assist other people and learning a lot as I went along. So I did feel that when it was time to finally shoot our film, I felt very ready to do so. And of course, there's a million things you keep learning, but I owe a lot to all the people who I've learned a lot from over these years.
Okay, thanks. Isabel, who wins 2 awards today, the best hat and the best production design. She's in her mom's place, who's a seamstress. And I kind of recognize at the beginning all the threads and stuff back there. So that's just a fun setting. It looks like a movie set, almost like you're, doing something. So did you have any mentors or people that really kind of helped you along the way in your path? And I know you kind of meandered and, making short things and content and having families and children and this burning desire to make a feature came up. So you had to have someone you were helping you maybe along the way, but you tell us.
I think my answer is kind of no, actually. I do have a few friends that are filmmakers who had made their first films, and every once in a while I would field questions to them, but I guess I'm just made a lot of short content and had that fire really, to keep going. But I will say that my team was incredible. Like I did consult a lot with my producer, and I'm a very collaborative worker with my cast and crew. But there were definitely script changes on set with actors that were like, this doesn't feel right, or this doesn't feel organic or truthful, and so there were things that we altered, especially Devin, my lead actress. She's incredibly intelligent and intuitive. I mean, everybody on set was incredible, but she has a real strong sense of story, and she's a writer, a very good writer. So yeah, and she was my friend going in. She was the only person I knew making my first feature, so it was really wonderful to have a friend, because it was such an overwhelmingly huge project to undertake. So she kind of I would say was like my strongest partner on set. But for whoever is asking the question, I would also say, if you haven't made short content before, it's probably a good first step before.
Thank you. If you can't make a cohesive story in 10 minutes, by God, don't do it in 90 or 130 or whatever. You should, tell a tight story and then work your way up. And, everyone has their own path, and I don't want to discourage anyone, but please, try something short first. It's vastly easier. And one thing also is about, I'm going to move on to Justin next, but one thing that stood out in your director's notes is, which I read everything, credits, director's notes, and letters, and I reread things when I'm making decisions. But yours really, impressed me with the teamwork, the whole gestalt that you had of your set, where it was very collaborative and very women-centric, and you made it deliberately that way. And I think the synergy really paid off. So, mentor free, you sort of did it, created your own cocoon of mentorship. So that's just another path. So that's great. Justin.
Question is, do any mentors? Is that right?
Yeah. Or, people that kind of helped you, guide you through, this process or getting to it, writing, you must have had, somebody along the way.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of mentors, I think that's something I think they're extremely important. And but at the same time, I don't feel like I've had one. Like in the filmmaking. Yeah, I've had other mentors, of course, in life, but I've always wanted one. I've always kind of been needy for one. I've always pursued people. I've tried to, find them. I feel like maybe, yeah, I am a bit of a hermit though, so that prevents me somewhat. So yeah, I mean, I had a writing mentor for a little while in college, but a professor, but he ended up, it turns badly. It turns kind of like, yeah, I've had some turn bad and it didn't last long term. And I would say the closest thing I've had a mentor in terms of a mentor on this project was actually our creative producer, Brandon Vetter. And that was one reason why I brought him in, because he's an accomplished director himself. We went to film school together, so he's not really older than me, but he is more accomplished as a director. He went to South by Southwest with his doc, Strange Negotiations, a few years ago. He's produced some other like really good festival films. So he was kind of in terms of a directing mentor, he was that, and I used him as a sounding board throughout the whole process. And he was just, without knowing it, teaching me the entire way through, and when I was on the brink of, hitting a wall, because you hit walls, occasionally, he was the one to kind of push me through and encourage me while also telling me the truth, which is important. You don't want someone just, blowing smoke. So he was always encouraging and truthful. And so, yeah, he's probably the closest thing I have to a mentor.
Yeah, all paths are, unique and different. Yeah. And, that's part of the joy of this collaboration or this, competition is it instills that and suggests it, behind the scenes that, hey, make connections and go outside of your bubble and meet someone in a new city and do new things, try new things. The film world is pretty small after all. So it's just good to reach out all the way. So we're running a little short on time, but we're going to close out the show with Paula and talk about, same question to you. Did you have any important mentors along the way?
Well, I'd like Alana. I had a Thrival gig as a nanny and babysitter for many years for various Hollywood people. So like Chris Misiano and Michael Morris are both directors and producers in the TV world. Were amazing if I had little questions here and there. Although for this film, I didn't do too much other than, soak up their amazingness from the stuff they've done over the years. But I would say it is who you know, and yet you can always meet new people. And I took kind of my peer group who I'd seen through the web series world rise up through the ranks and really picked their brains, especially I would say probably Brett Register, who's a good friend of mine. We started making web series together. I produced his stuff. I was in his stuff. And now he's like running content for Mattel. And Bria Grant, who's gone on to direct a bunch of really cool horror films. And America Young, who is an amazing actress, stunt woman, voiceover actor, as well as now she's been directing tons of TV this last year. And she also is a member of the Chimera Project, who pointed me into that direction. So when I would get stuck or need a little advice, I would definitely always come to them. Pretty sure Brett actually introduced me to my amazing editor, Rachel Henry, who was my big sounding board and filling in my blind spots, as I mentioned. So yeah, it's who you know, and yet this wonderful, weird, crazy thing of the internet now, we are able to reach out and connect to people more and more now, which is, it can be awful, but it can also be, an asset if you use it.
Yeah, it's sterile, but it's great. I get the chance to, look at people. Like I would not have been able to meet Isabel this year, but we talked. We had, I did your Q&A. So I got a little bit of a connection there too. So we're about to the end. So I wanted to thank you all for being here this morning, again, for contributing your fine stories. Andrea, for, we've been doing this together for a very long time, for, lots of legacy and for the right reasons. There were times over time when the board said, oh, that, you don't make enough money from that. There's no real sponsorship and it's expensive. Don't do this anymore. I'm like, nope. We're going to keep doing this because it's important. It's an important part of the fabric that is our festival. So thanks again. We got our staff has to go back to work
On
like
a
real
closing
soon.
note, I'm gonna
Yes.
on a closing note to our audience that's watching too.
Mhm.
I just want to take the quick second. All of you mentioned communities and being a part of a community. And as a film commissioner, we do have a Missouri Stories scriptwriting fellowship program that is still taking submissions for the next few days. That its goal is for this very reason, to build community and support filmmakers. And so I'm happy to hear all of you say that, and that the script process is so like number one in all of this. So just a plug for Missouri Stories Scriptwriting Fellowship for those of you that are listening and learning from our filmmakers, and you guys too. Justin, I'd love for you to come over the border and make a film here in Missouri. So, and Alana, you can come live here. That would be awesome.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Yes.
I think-
My family
You
is
too.
rapidly expanding in St. Louis. There's another baby due within the next few days, so I'm
Okay.
there.
Awesome. And,
I think
you know,
the-
parts of St. Louis look like Brooklyn. I mean, some, you know, parts of St. Louis.
I've been told the plug is about to be pulled. So
Okay.
Alana and Isabel and Justin and Paula and Andrea, thank you so much again. And thank you for our audience members for watching the show today.